Hey, all you cool cats and kittens. It's your favorite history teacher back at you again with another historical video. Today, we're going to take a pause on World War One, and we're going to focus all our attention today on the Russian Revolution and what the heck happened in Russia following their exit from World War One. So let's get into it. Okay. Hello. There we go. Okay, chapter 9, lesson 3. Chapter 9, lesson 3. Uh that was your warm up. Okay, objectives were identify causes and effects of the March 1917 revolution, and then we're going to summarize how Lenin and the Bolsheviks gained control of Russia. All right. There's a lot of writing for this lecture. Um Partly due to, I took a Russian history class in college. So I like this stuff. And there are some things that probably don't need to know, but they're things I want you to know. So therefore, there's only like seven slides, but there is a lot of writing. So spoiler alert. All right, background. So we've already talked about this, but after its defeat by Japan 1905 and the revolution of 1905, Russia was unprepared militarily and technologically speaking for the total war of World War One. Russia had no competent military leaders, and Tsar Nicholas II insisted on taking personal charge of the armed forces despite his lack of ability and training. In addition, Russian industry was not able to produce the weapons needed for the army. Many soldiers trained with broomsticks, while others were sent to the front without rifles and then were told to pick one up from a dead comrade. So it's no reason why the Russian army suffered so many incredible losses, as 2 million soldiers were killed between 1914 and 1916. And on top of that, another 4 to 6 million were wounded or captured. A lot of people. By 1917, the Russian will to fight basically vanished. The autocratic leader, Tsar Nicholas II, relied on the army and bureaucracy to hold up his regime. He was further cut off from events when a man named Gregory Rasputin, known to be a mystic, began to influence the Tsarina Alexandra. While the Tsar was at the battlefront, it was rumored that Alexandra made all the important decisions after consulting with Rasputin. Rasputin's influence made him an important power behind the throne. As the leadership stumbled its way through a series of military and economic disasters, the Russian people grew tired of the Tsarist regime. Even conservative aristocrats who had supported the monarchy believed something needed to be done. They assassinated Rasputin December 1916, but it was too late to save the monarchy. So here's Russian World War I soldiers. The Tsar, I believe. I don't know why he's not wearing his funny hat. That's not the Tsar. This one or that one is the Tsar. I think it's this one. Oh, I lied. That's the Tsar. Look at him. That's the Tsar. That's Rasputin on the left, Tsarina Alexandra on the right. So story goes, Rasputin's abilities enamored the Tsarina because their son, his heir, had hemophilia. And if you don't know what hemophilia is, it's a blood clotting disease. Your blood doesn't clot like normal. And so if you get a cut a scrape, a bruise, you could get seriously sick. So she did anything and everything in her power to make her son feel better while her husband was away at war. And as the story goes, Rasputin was invited by these high elite officials. They poisoned him. And after he drank the poison, he was still living. And then they shot him, and he was still breathing. So they were like, well, this guy's not going to die. So let's throw him into the river. And it was only then, after they pulled him out, that he still had signs of not giving up as he like scratched the surface or whatever. Something like that. So fun times. If you know the Just Dance, rah, rah, Rasputin, that song, I would play, but copyright. And then if you've ever seen The Kingsman, the prequels, I show this scene in class. Or you could just look it up yourself on the YouTube. All right, Road to Revolution. So at the beginning of March 1917, the working class women led a series of strikes in the capital city of Petrograd, formerly St. Petersburg, helping change Russian history. A few weeks later, the Russian government had began bread rationing after the price of bread skyrocketed. Many of the women who stood in the lines waiting for bread were also factory workers who worked 12-hour days. Exhausted from the standing in line and distraught over half-starving children, women finally revolted. March 8th, around 100,000 women marched through the city of Petrograd demanding, quote, peace and bread and down with the autocracy. Soon the women would be joined by other workers, and together they called for a general strike. A general strike is a strike across all organizations, not just in one specific industry. And the strike shut down all factories in the city March 10th. So a couple days. The Tsarina wrote her husband at the battlefront, calling it a hooligan movement. If the weather were very cold, they would probably stay at home, end quote. Nicholas, being at the war front, then ordered his troops at home to break up the crowds by shooting them if necessary. Sounds right. However, soon large numbers of soldiers joined the demonstrators and refused to fire on the crowds. Well, when you lose the army, it's going to be bad. The Duma, Russia's legislative body, continued to meet even after attempts of Nicholas to dissolve it. March 12th, a couple days later, the Duma established a provisional government consisting mostly of middle-class representatives and urged the Tsar to step down. Nicholas reluctantly agreed to step down since he no longer had the support of the army or even the aristocrats who supported them. March 15th, a week later after all this demonstration, the 300-year-old Romanov dynasty came kaput. It's done. No more. So, get out of here. Here are some women with signs. Here's the Tsar after he abdicated from the front. He looks dejected. Soviet beginning. So the provisional government was headed by one man named Alexander Kerensky, and he did the blunderous thing of trying to carry on the war to preserve Russia's honor. The decision to remain in the war was a major blunder, as it satisfied neither the workers nor the peasants, who were tired and angry from the years of suffering, wanted the war to be over. The government also faced a challenge to its authority, something called the Soviets. Soviets, test question, were councils comprised of representatives from workers and soldiers. Example, the Soviet of Petrograd was formed in 1917. At the same time, Soviets will spring up in army units, factory towns, and rural areas. Think of Soviets as like unions, but not, you know? The Soviets, largely made up of socialists, represented more radical interests than of the lower classes. And one such group, the Bolsheviks, came to play a crucial role. Here's a Soviet. All right, Lenin and his squad. So the Bolsheviks began as a small faction of a Marxist party called the Russian Social Democrats. The Bolsheviks came under the leadership of one man, Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, known to the world as V.I. Lenin. Under Lenin's direction, the Bolsheviks became a party dedicated to violent revolution. Lenin believed only violent revolution could destroy the capitalist system. If you recall, capitalism and Marxism don't work. Marxists don't like capitalists. A vanguard of activists must form as a small party of well-disciplined professional revolutionaries to accomplish this task. A little bit background of Lenin. Between the years of 1900 and 1917, Lenin spent most of his time abroad, a reason why he changed his name. His older brother tried to assassinate the Tsar before Tsar Nicholas II came to power. And so, his family was labeled a traitor. So he didn't want to, become known. So he changed his name. When the Russian provisional government was formed in 1917, he saw an opportunity to seize power. He was off and away in Germany. Test question, April 1917. German military leaders, hoping to create disorder in Russia, shipped Lenin back to Russia in a sealed train as so to prevent his ideas from infecting Germany. Worldwide Revolution. He was reading Karl Marx. Lenin's arrival began a new phase of the Russian Revolution. Lenin maintained that the Soviets of soldiers, workers, and peasants were ready-made instruments of power. He believed that the Bolsheviks should work to get towards gaining control of these groups and then use them to overthrow the provisional government. At the same time, the Bolsheviks reflected the discontent of the people. Test question, they promised an end to the war, to redistribute all land to peasants, to transfer factories and industries from capitalists to committees of workers, and to transfer government power from the provisional government to the Soviets. 3 simple slogans summed up the Bolshevik program: peace, land, bread, worker control of production, and all power to the Soviets. So a lot has happened. Germany, seeing that Lenin was a stir of the pot, they knew that if he sent it was like a time bomb, a ticking time bomb. They knew that if Lenin went back, this would happen. And to get Russia out of the war and to not fight a 2-front war, that's what Germany wanted, and they got it. That's Lenin. That's Lenin arriving off his train, or so they say. That's the Bolshevik. I tried to look up Bolshevik logo. All right, Bolshevik moves. By the end of October 1917, the Bolsheviks made up a slight majority in the Petrograd and Moscow Soviets. The number of party members had grown from 50,000 to 240,000. Leon Trotsky was the head of the Petrograd Soviet, and the Bolsheviks were in a position to claim power in the name of the Soviets. So during the night of November 6th, Bolshevik forces seized the Winter Palace, the seat of the provisional government. The government quickly collapsed with little bloodshed. This overthrow coincided with the meeting of the All-Russian Congress of Soviets, which represented local society countrywide. Outwardly, Lenin turned over the power of the provisional government to the Congress of Soviets. The real power, however, was passed to a council headed by Lenin. The Bolsheviks renamed themselves the Communists, and they still had a long way to go to fixing the country. Lenin had promised peace, yet he realized delivering peace would not be easy. It would mean the humiliating loss of much of Russian territory, but there was no real choice. So, March 3rd, 1918, Lenin signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. That's how you say it, Litovsk. With Germany, and gave up Eastern Poland, Ukraine, Finland, and the Baltic provinces. To his critics, he argued it made no difference, as the spread of the socialist revolution throughout Europe would make a treaty irrelevant. In any case, Lenin promised peace to the Russian people, but real peace did not come because the country will soon sink into a civil war. Here's a storming of the Winter Palace. That's Leon Trotsky. He was very good, a very good speaker, very wise orator, good with his words. This is the land lost. So they lost all this stuff, and that stuff. Here's a more pixelated picture, but as you can see, bada bing, bada boom. Civil War. So it's the Reds versus the Whites. FYI, spoiler alert. Many Russians were opposed to the new Bolshevik or communist government. These people included not only groups loyal to the Tsar, but liberal and anti-Leninist socialists and the Allied powers countries. The Allied powers were worried about communist takeover, so they soon sent troops to Russia in hopes to bring Russia back into the war. The Allies rarely fought on Russian soil, but they gave material aid to the anti-communists. Between 1918 and 1921, the Communists or Red Army fought on many fronts. The first serious threat came from Siberia as an anti-communist or white force and advanced almost to the Volga River before being stopped. Attacks came from the Ukrainians and the Baltic regions in mid-1918. White forces swept through Ukraine and advanced almost to Moscow before being pushed back. By 1920, the major white forces had been defeated and Ukraine retaken. The next year, the communist regime regained control over the independent nationalist governments in Georgia, Russian Armenia, and Azerbaijan. The royal family was another victim of the civil war, as the Tsar abdicated. His wife and their 5 children were held as prisoners. In 1918, they were moved to Yekaterinburg, a mining town in the Ural Mountains. But on the night of July 16, 17, members of the local Soviet murdered the Tsar and his family and burned their bodies in a nearby mine shaft. And as the story goes, one such daughter got away. They made a whole movie about it. But I think I was doing some research while, looking up pictures and stuff. And it turns out that don't think she escaped because they're able to identify skulls and teeth through DNA sequencing, DNA testing to find out that she in fact was there. Sorry if I ruined the movie for you, but here you have some Bolsheviks. These are poor women accepting aid from the Allied powers. This is the Civil War map. Again, don't speak or understand Russian, so don't know what all these banners mean. These flags, do they mean battles? Here's a picture of the royal family. And there are their dead bodies. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I believe this is the missing body, maybe. I would show the Anastasia movie, but copyright. War, communism. So how did Lenin and the communists triumph in the Civil War over such overwhelming forces? One reason was that the Red Army was a well-disciplined fighting force due to organizational genius of Leon Trotsky. As Commissar of War, Trotsky reinstated the draft and insisted on rigid discipline. So, for example, soldiers who deserted or refused to obey orders were executed on the spot. The disunity of the anti-communist forces weakened their efforts. Political differences created distrust among the White Russians, as some suggested the reinstatement of the Tsar. Others wanted a more liberal and democratic program, and the White Russians had no common goal. The communists, in contrast, had a single-minded sense of purpose. Inspired by their vision for socialist order, the communists had revolutionary zeal and convictions. They were able to translate their revolutionary faith into practical instruments of power. A policy of war communism was used to ensure regular supplies for the Red Army. War communism meant, test question, that the government controlled the banks and most industries, seized grain from peasants, and centralized state administration all under communist control. So again, that's Leon Trotsky. That's red versus white. Last slide. Another instrument was Communist Revolutionary Terror. A new red secret police known as the Cheka will form into what is now the modern day KKK. KKK? I take that back, not the KKK. The KGB, my bad. My bad. Began a red terror aimed at to destroy all those opposed to the new regime and an element of fear to the communist regime. Almost like the reign of terror from the French Revolution. Wow, history does repeat itself. Finally, foreign armies on Russian soil enabled the communists to appeal to the powerful force of Russian patriotism. At one point, 100,000 foreign troops, mostly Japanese, British, American, and French, were stationed in Russia in support of anti-communist forces. Their presence made it easy for the communist government to call on patriotic Russians to fight foreign attempts to control the country. By 1921, the communists were in total command of Russia. The communist regime had transformed Russia to a centralized state dominated by a single power party. The state was largely hostile to Allied powers because the Allies had tried to help the communists during the war. Can't have that. And that's an early picture of members of the Cheka. Oh, I need to get the book. Hold on. Hold up. Hold up. Okay. So that is going to conclude uh our lecture. See, got the book. I had to go get the book. You didn't hear my feet. We have page 348, 2 through 4. Page 348, 2 through 4. That is your homework. So I know it was a little, I said there was a lot of writing. There were 7 slides. What can I say? A lot of writing. And that's the Russian Revolution. So another revolution to remember about, you know? You know? Oh, anyways, hopefully you guys did enjoy that. I certainly like Russian history. Not to say that I'm a Russian history buff, but I just like it. It's dramatic. Anastasia, Rasputin. Rah, rah, Rasputin. Anyways, stop singing. Okay, page 348 is your homework. Hopefully you guys did enjoy that. If you did, make sure you hit that like button, leave a comment, subscribe. See you in the next one. Peace.